Fredericksburg, Virginia, December 1862. Chancellorsville, May 1863, 6 months later, in the same historic state. Two victories of major importance for Robert E. Lee and his Confederate hosts in the war between the states, the military high noon of the Confederacy. Through them, the Southern Army reached its peak morale. The spirit of the twice-defeated Federal Army fell to its lowest. After Chancellorsville, Lee determined to carry the war into Northern Territory. He knew the discouragement in Federal ranks, the pessimism among civilians in the North, where the movement for peace at any price was growing. A successful Northern campaign would break the backbone of resistance. Using the protecting screen of the Blue Ridge Mountains to conceal his northern thrust, Lee moved his full army over the war-famous Shenandoah Valley Pike through Front Royal and Winchester, Virginia, crossing the Potomac at Shepherdstown into Maryland on June 23rd. Meanwhile, departure was discovered, and the Federal Army started north on the eastern side of the mountains to defend Washington and Baltimore, crossing the Potomac at Edwards Ferry on June 25th. The Confederate advance had reached Carlisle and York, Pennsylvania on June 28th, uncomfortably close to the state capital at Harrisburg, when Lee discovered the Federals had followed him and had reached the region around Frederick, Maryland. Forced to withdraw and protect his line of retreat, the Shenandoah Valley, Lee concentrated his troops at Gettysburg. The next day, the Federals started pressing in northward from Frederick, the Confederates eastward from the mountains. The rising tides of blue and gray were increasing in size and power, and then they met at Gettysburg. On this battlefield, in 3 bloody days, July 1st, 2nd, 3rd, Lee's dream was shattered. Gettysburg was the beginning of the end for the Confederacy. And 75 years later, in July 1938, these armies met again at Gettysburg, their ranks reduced from hundreds of thousands to 8,000 aged veterans. And once more, this picturesque Pennsylvania town resounded to the tramp of marching feet and the roll of martial drums as the veterans encamped at nearby Gettysburg National Military Park. Paying honor to the old soldiers, almost every type of modern Army equipment rolled through the streets of Gettysburg, offering stark contrast to the lumbering mortars and howitzers of 1863. Although in 1938 there were 8,000 veterans still living, only 1,818 were able to attend their last reunion, Union men outnumbering Confederates 3 to 1. More than 160,000 soldiers fought at Gettysburg, but only 65 who actually took part in the offensive returned for the reunion. The average age of all the veterans in camp in 1938 was 94, but they had lots of fun in boasting of their health and strength. One of the most interesting camera subjects was Mr. William H. Jackson, a volunteer in Stannard's Vermont Brigade. Soon after the war, he became the pioneer photographer of the then unknown Far West and was first to record the wondrous beauties of Yellowstone Park. During various Civil War campaigns, Mr. Jackson made now invaluable sketches of important battles and historic areas. And how the words did fly. These aged but talkative vet living stories of tempestuous maneuvers and sallies, probably much in the style of the Union General Hancock's account of Lee's costly attack on Cemetery Ridge. The colors of the different regiments were now advanced, waving defiance of the long line of battle flags presented by the enemy. The men pressed firmly under them. After a few minutes of desperate fighting, the enemy's troops were repulsed. The battle flags were ours and the victory won. And everybody was all ears when they told of events associated with monuments and areas now in Gettysburg National Military Park. Northern or Southern, every veteran renewed the memory of his leader at Gettysburg, whether General Lee or General Meade, whose statues are near the position from which they directed their armies. These statues are but a mile apart, across the fields lying between the Union and Confederate lines. And skyward monuments erected by various states to memorialize their soldiers who took part in the bloody struggle brought to mind troop movements such as Pickett's Charge or the attack by Law's Alabama Brigade. Actual spots where famous skirmishes and attacks took place were revisited. The slopes of Little Round Top in the distance, the massive boulders of Devil's Den, behind which Confederate sharpshooters harried and sniped at the Union troops stretched out on an opposite slope. Spangler's Spring is vividly remembered because it was one of the few sources of water for the troops, and its possession passed back and forth between the two armies. Once again, these soldiers of another day stood by an unforgettable stone wall, used as a Union breastworks in repulsing Confederate advances. Only a few Southerners crossed it. Nearby is the high water mark of the Confederacy, the point where the Southern lines began to fall back from their greatest advance to the eventual downfall of the Confederate States. Common feeling to veteran and visitor alike at the reunion was the sanctity of the National Cemetery, located on the wooded hill in the distance. Here is the Soldiers' National Monument, marking the spot from which President Lincoln delivered his Gettysburg Address of November 19, 1863. And thus was commemorated the 75th anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg and the final reunion of the blue and gray. Their deeds and thoughts are now forever placed in the realm of memory and history. But that the spirit of these valiant men might have some physical form, a memorial to them was placed in a conspicuous part of Gettysburg Park. A vast audience attended the dedication by President Roosevelt, and once again, all roads led to Gettysburg. Visitors came from the four corners of the nation. The Eternal Light Peace Memorial, surmounted by a bronze urn holding a perpetual flame, symbolizing the broad horizons and high destiny of the American people, cast in the mold of victories for union and independence. An enduring light to guide us in unity and fellowship. An enduring light dedicated to American peace. An enduring light to the memory of heroic Americans. An enduring light, a symbol of enduring democracy. That they met at Gettysburg was not in vain.
John Brown, fanatic abolitionist, raided Harper's Ferry, the dividing line between North and South. The war threatened. South Carolina was the first state to secede from the Union, but Montgomery, Alabama, was chosen as the first Confederate capital. Here Jefferson Davis, president of the Confederacy, lived. Feeling ran high in the southern states who believed their sovereign rights were imperiled by Lincoln's determination to hold them to the Union. Curiously, the song of the South, Dixie, was written by a northern minstrel. Picturesque old Charleston, South Carolina, was the first center of southern preparation for the impending clash. Senator John C. Calhoun defended the rights of the slave owners. He argued that bonded slavery with family care for life was superior to industrial slavery. South Carolina appealed to her sister states to join her in breaking away from the Union. 10 of these did. Fort Sumter near Charleston Harbor dominated the city. It was a federal fort. On a fatal day, this gun rashly fired on Fort Sumter. The Union government had been attacked. This was war. Rapidly, the men of the South left fragrant tobacco fields to carry arms, fighting, they believed, for their right to independence. Historic Raleigh, North Carolina, became a strategic center for war massing of men and of materials. Southern homes emptied of their men, like this home of Governor William Blount, pioneer of Tennessee, at Knoxville. The women of the South kept heart-aching vigil through the long, cruel years of war. Early during hostilities, the South's capital was shifted to Virginia, which remained vigorously rebellious until Grant took Richmond. This is the Confederate White House. And here the Confederate capital, where Virginia's legislators voted to join the war for secession. And Virginia gave the South its great leader, Robert E. Lee. This is General Lee's home in Richmond. The war wasn't taken very seriously in the North until the Southern Army crushed a large federal force at the Battle of Bull Run of Manassas, where Stonewall Jackson earned his name of Stonewall. By land and sea, the states fought. Admiral Farragut was the nation's naval chief. Here is the figurehead of his flagship, the Hartford, which chased raiders from northern ports. John Ericsson, a naturalized Swedish-American, designed the first ironclad, the Monitor, which fought the Merrimack in the first sea battle of iron ships. Here is the Merrimack's anchor. Union forces invaded the South, and at Fredericksburg, Virginia, on the Rappahannock River, they were shattered in a furious battle. "2,400 men lie buried here, 1,800 of them unknown." Again at Chancellorsville, the federal troops were repulsed. But the victory cost the South one of its great military leaders, Stonewall Jackson, killed here accidentally by one of his own pickets. Richmond venerates this monument of the man who never knew defeat, General Jackson. The South then invaded the North at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Huge armies concentrated for a decisive battle. From this gun was fired the first shot in the Battle of Gettysburg on July the 1st, 1863. the seesaw of the furious battle, this observation tower was seized and used by both sides. General Warren of the Union forces memorialized just as he stood surveying the battlefield. Sharpshooters on both sides found nests of rocks as natural strongholds. This one was fittingly called the Devil's Den. Desperately over this ground, as superior forces wore them down, General Pickett led his men in a terrific charge. It failed. This statue of General Reynolds marks the part of the battlefield occupied by the Federal troops. Abraham Lincoln slept in this house at Gettysburg, the night before he dedicated the battlefield.
77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal.
Here is the spot where the immortal Gettysburg Address was made.
That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God may have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
The statue to General Lee and the Virginians who fell. A decisive Northern victory was the siege and capitulation of Vicksburg after heavy fighting on the Mississippi. Now a splendid national park in Vicksburg brings rest and peace where once raged Red War. General Pemberton commanded the Confederate troops at Vicksburg, holding out against great odds, and so he is honored by his compatriots. So too is the vigorous and victorious Northern commander, General Grant, later President Grant. Tennessee became a theater of war. Lookout Mountain and Moccasin Bend saw terrific struggles. The Union Army sought the prize city of Chattanooga in its victorious march southward. This rock, Umbrella Rock, was a point of vantage for the Union leaders in the fighting about Chattanooga. Pretty and peaceful now, this is still called Bloody Pond because of the Battle of Chickamauga Creek. Both sides fought desperately for this water. Union soldiers broke into Chattanooga on this locomotive. 8 of them were killed. Towards the end of the war, fierce fighting took place along Missionary Ridge in Tennessee. The Union forces pressed on relentlessly against weakened and ill-provided opposition. Then came the Battle of Appomattox, Virginia, the last hope. Here is the site of the McLean House at Appomattox, General Lee's headquarters. And under this tree at Appomattox on a cool spring day, Robert E. Lee surrendered to General Grant. The war was over. This bridge at Appomattox stands to the memory of the men of both North and South, a bridge of brotherhood. At Durham, North Carolina, the last leader of the South, General Joseph E. Johnston, surrendered to General Sherman, pleading for unity, which this monument stands for. And each year, the thinning lines of the blue and the gray march in memory of the war that gave us one country under God forever.